unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome and happy Friday. We got a packed lineup tonight. I'm really excited about it. Here are some of the things you'll learn on the show. Calling all Bruce Willises. It looks like researchers have ran a simulation, and if an asteroid is approaching Earth, we can nuke it. I've previously reported that doing that would cause catastrophic damage because of all the little bits, but no, we were wrong. If there's an asteroid headed for Earth, there's a good chance we can get rid of it with a nuke. How? What? Details in about 10 minutes time. Then after that, this Valentine's Day, you receive a love note from that special someone. Was it beautiful? Was it poetic? Was it secretly written by a robot? And if so, does that feel kind of gross? Halfway through the hour, we'll unpack the science of AI romance letters and why outsourcing your feelings makes everyone feel worse. So before you write a love note with ChatGPT to that special someone, you're going to want to tune into that. Those are some of the topics we'll cover on the show. There will be more, you will learn more, but for now, let's dive in. It's everything you wanted to know, and maybe some things you didn't, about the latest science news. We are joined by Professor Jesse Rogerson from York University. We asked the question, if you want to avoid microplastics, should you drink bottled water that comes in plastic? I would think the answer to this question is obviously no. Welcome, Jesse.
David, let's talk about microplastics in water. Yeah, you would have thought that the answer would be obviously no, but there's the misconception or maybe the good perception that bottled water would be safer, right? You'd think, okay, this water's like pristine, it's in the bottle, it's in a plant, it's not the stuff coming out of my taps. You open up your tap and you don't know what your pipes are like, that can be different all over the country, but you get like a quality product from a bottle of water. Maybe, this is a perception I had. And so this study was like, okay, well, let's look at the water coming out of taps across the United States and the water in bottling plants and see how they compare specifically with microplastics and nanoplastics. And they found in this study that, in particular in the Lake Erie area, that bottled water contains 3 times as many nanoplastics than regular tap water. And the author of the study says, quote, for the average person who is thirsty, the best way to do that would be drinking water straight out of the tap. So you heard that straight from the scientist.
You heard that straight from the source, and how eerie that finding is. I had to. Microplastics, how bad are they for you? I remember there was a plastic called BPA that they kind of like phased out, and the plastics could like leach to your like hormone receptors. It was like demonstrably kind of bad for you. It probably shouldn't have been on the market in the first place, but that's been taken off the market. What do these microplastics do? Or is it a big just like, we don't know, some people worry, some people don't, the evidence doesn't look great, but there's no conclusive findings?
So I guess that's a good summary of it. There's some nuance there. First, with this study, the reason this one was able to be so successful in finding so much is they were really focusing on nanoplastics, which is smaller than microplastics. So you wouldn't be able to see them in other earlier studies. But then they had a couple of different ways of finding them. They were using scanning electron microscopes, and they were using like chemical inducers. And they were able to dig in deeper and smaller and find more plastics. It seems to be leaching from the plastic bottles themselves. And there's a lot of studies that are showing that microplastics and nanoplastics can cross biological barriers. So they end up in the liver, in the kidneys, in the brain. Now, I was looking into this very question that you just asked. What is the biological impact here? And the short answer is it's unknown at the moment, though there is some scary initial findings that you might want to put in the category of we really need to pay attention. And one was that there was a study showing from 2016, comparing water from 2016 to 2024, significantly, like exponentially higher plastics. So we're talking like over the last 10 years, things have dramatically changed in our water, in our drinking water. And they found in this study that there was a higher concentration of plastics in the brains of 12 people with documented diagnosis of dementia. So now hold on. I don't want to overstep this. It was 12 people. They had diagnoses of dementia, and they had more microplastics in their brains. than people who didn't have dementia diagnoses.
And causation and correlation, it's startling, but we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's startling, but we don't know. But here's the thing, though, is, if you compare it like the existential threats to humanity, climate change is a big one. But climate change is one I feel that we can mitigate with technology. So we can manage things, even if we we need to manage climate change, of course, but because that has huge implications. But here, this is one where it's once the plastics are in your brain, I don't know how we can manage that with technology, or at least at the moment we have nothing for it. So we have this existential threat to our biology. We don't understand the implications from it, and it's only getting worse, not better. So I as a scientist, I look at all of this data and I say, this is scary.
Now, and don't drink bottled water, I guess, is the finding. But I don't know. It's so wild to me, people who only drink bottled water, who live in cities with perfectly good water. People move to North America, to Canada, the US, to Europe, from all parts of the world. And they're like, wow, clean drinking water. Like, that is remarkable. It's one of the greatest achievements of the places where it's been figured out. And then for people to be like, no, I'd rather actually buy wasteful water bottles, disposable water bottles, that is of worse quality, and drink that than this amazing thing that comes from my tap. I literally pull a lever in my kitchen, and I can drink as much clean water as I want. It's amazing when you think about it. Like 1,000 years, 100 years ago, you had to go with a bucket to get some dirty water out of a well, So drink from the tap, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Exactly. And it's good water. It's good water that comes out. That's what we drink in our house. And I don't want to spend money on bottled water. It's free. It's quote on. I'm already paying for the water coming out of the tap. I might as well use it.
Absolutely. Now, if you live in a part of the world where the water is not clean, do not follow my advice. Don't drink it. But that's...
Yeah, certainly, of course. It's all of this is regionally dependent, right? And even within the United States, there's places where the tap water is a bad thing to do, right?
Flint, Michigan, there are places in Canada that have bad tap water. So yeah, you got to be careful. But in general, like if you live in a big city with great water, drink from the tap. It's so wasteful not to.
Save your brain and your liver and your kidneys from microplastics.
All right, let's go to our next story, which I don't really want to do because it proves my mother right. She wouldn't let me have Lucky Charms as a kid. She said no sugar cereals. I had to get the sugar-free or low sugar stuff, like cornflakes, boring. But yeah, a high sugar breakfast ain't good for you. Shocker on that one.
Yeah, the breakfast is the most important meal of the day. People are like, see, we told you. This was a group of scientists. This is in Japan. They wanted to actually try and measure the effect of different types of breakfasts. So they, and in particular, they focused on young females. And the reason for that is because apparently stats indicate that a sizable portion of adult women eat confectionaries, eat sweet snacks as their first meal of the day. Pastries, right? I mean, I do too. I just had a donut for breakfast. And
it's literally the stock photograph in this research paper summary article of a woman eating a donut.
I know. Yes, that's true. Yes. And so they wanted to look into this. How does it actually affect you in a physiological way? So they got 13, it's a small study, 13 healthy individual university students, young females. And they put them, and each student was their own control. So they put them through 2 different meals separated by a week. The first meal was like a balanced breakfast where they had like rice. It's like a traditional Japanese breakfast. Rice, eggs, there was vegetables, some soup, traditional things. It was a good balance of carbohydrates, of proteins, and very little like high fat, high sugar stuff. And then the next week they had donuts basically for breakfast with some strawberry milk. And then they measured physiological things like body temperature and heart rate, as well as compared them in cognitive tests. And they found that when they had the high sugar, high fat breakfasts, they performed worse on cognitive tests that involved task switching, going from one thing to the other. Just straight up showing that the meal you have affects your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, and either triggers your like readiness or your like sleepiness. And that was what happened.
All right. Well, Mom, I guess you're right. I shouldn't eat Count Chocula and Lucky Charms before school.
You can now, though.
Oh, well, because I'm an adult, I guess. No one can tell me what to do.
Because you're an adult. Your mom's not stopping you now.
When we come back with Jesse Rogerson, professor from York University, this story's cool. Bruce Willis is going to want to listen up for this one. Turns out scientists did the math, and if there's an asteroid coming straight for Earth, we can nuke it after all. Well, maybe. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show. We'll tell you about that in a second.
keep listening to The Last Show with David Cooper, because the alien invasion can wait. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Don't want to close my eyes, don't want to fall asleep. I gotta say, it's not the first time I've sung Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith when we're talking about asteroids hitting the Earth. But there is a new research paper. Scientists have looked into what might happen if there's an asteroid coming for us and we nuke it. And in the past, I've reported that that would be a bad thing. It would blow up the asteroid into pieces. It would destroy Earth anyway. But a new simulation says, might be a good idea. I'm here with Jesse Rogerson, an astrophysicist and professor, to talk. What was that movie called? I forget now.
Armageddon?
Armageddon! Thank you. Okay, so we can Armageddon an asteroid, is what you're saying.
Well, so, I mean, the results are interesting. So asteroids are out there. We get hit every day by little things all the time.
You sound like my ex, but keep going.
The fact that a big thing could hit us is not a 0% chance. We need to look into this stuff. But the going idea for stopping an asteroid from hitting Earth is deflection. The idea is not to destroy it completely. It's just to nudge it off course, especially if you can do this early on, like if you can do it like a decade or more before the potential impact, then it's easier to deflect. And there's a variety of ways of doing that. You could literally throw something at it, which is something we tested with the DART mission. You probably remember that, where they literally shot an impactor at an asteroid and saw if it moved, which it did. But the idea of blowing something up, as you pointed out, you could fragment it and then you just have a bunch of smaller things that are still really bad to hit us. And so the question is, what happens when you actually send a nuclear bomb at a thing like an asteroid? And so to test that, how do you test that? How do you test out if something like that would work? Because if you test it in real life scenario, then you're just going to pepper us with a bunch of asteroids anyway.
Simulation.
You simulate. Well, they simulated, and they took a real rock, a real meteorite, and they had a proton beam to simulate the amount of energy deposited from a nuclear explosion. And they just deposited a bunch of energy onto rocks from space, and they wanted to see if we really put a lot of energy onto you're simulating an explosion, what happens to the rocks? And they found that the structural integrity of the rock doesn't do what you would expect. It was more interested in deforming and dissipating the energy of the impact of the beam than it was fragmenting. And so the idea they think then would be on, if you have a a kilometer size object, something that could be really bad, if you exposed it to this amount of energy, that it wouldn't just necessarily fragment, that it would deform and melt or vaporize in some way. Lending to the idea that maybe nuclear options are possible here. Now, that being said, this isn't this isn't like Armageddon, where you go there and drill a hole down into it and explode it from the inside. The going idea, if you are going to use a nuclear option on an asteroid, would be to send it near to the asteroid, explode it very close to it, so that you vaporize a portion of it, which then would knock it off course.
So the rock goes through this high energy, explosion and then vaporizes rather than breaks up.
Yes, exactly. Vaporizes or deforms.
Cool.
And so you can shift momentum, and you can and if it vaporizes, then it can kind of act like its own rocket. If it's dissipating gas away from itself, then that's like a rocket. It's like a balloon, right? You let the gas out and off it flies. And if you vaporize part of an asteroid, then off it flies in a different direction. Give it a little acceleration. So the simulation seems to show that our understanding of meteorites and our understanding of rocks in space might be something we weren't fully wrapping our heads around, and we might be able to use high energy things like nuclear bombs.
I think if we get to the next 100 years, humanity, without destroying ourselves, I think we may have the tech to avert an extinction level impact event. We're kind of going in the right direction with this stuff. Obviously, if we detect an asteroid tomorrow that's going to hit us in a week, we'll probably be toast. But it seems like humanity wants to get there, and it seems like it may be possible.
I am 100% with you on this. Looking at how space access has changed in the last 20 years, with the advent of private companies, SpaceX and Blue Origin, with the ease of access, the lower amounts of costs. And I think humanity over the next 100 years, 200 years is going to proliferate out into the solar system. We're looking at like the Expanse type situation with less, I don't know about any of the drama, but if you watch that show, you have like human settlements in various places. And that's like, I think that's a real possibility. And the idea of like mining asteroids, the idea of utilizing the resources out there in the solar system, I think is very much within our grasp, which is going to include managing threats from asteroids and comets, say. I think this is a very doable thing. It's just going to we got some time ahead of us. So we just got to, like you said, we got to get through the next period, however long that is.
Let's talk nuclear stuff more, but continue the conversation onto a new science news story. We go to Japan, where there was the awful Fukushima nuclear event because of the tsunami and the earthquake and all that. Of course, areas in that region have high radiation. It was a disaster. What happens in those areas? Does all life perish, or do some forms of life, like funguses and microbes and stuff, do they thrive, or are they completely unaffected?
Yeah, it's like really interesting what happens in these areas. So as you point out, there's like radiation proof organisms that thrive in these places. There's funguses, there's different bacteria that can manage, like in Chernobyl, for example. They can go there now years and years and years later and see various colonies of different microbes and funguses that are thriving in these radiation dominant environments, what we would call an extremophile, an organism that lives and thrives in an extreme environment. They exist in variety of places around the planet, no oxygen environments, high radiation environments, high salt environments, the list goes on. So there are adaptations that have been made by life to manage these places. And in Fukushima, where we had this reactor meltdown, now we have to go in and we have to clean up. And the scientists and the engineers, part of this decommissioning of this site, went in and wanted to like take a look at what type of life was there. And they found inside the reactor in these like overflow, they're called torus rooms, there's all this water, the seawater that had, flooded in. And that was highly radiative water now. It's radioactive water. And they could see in it there was microbes growing in it, and so they went and they were able to test it and get a sense of it. But they found that it was just regular old like bacteria, regular old microbes growing that you would just see in any marine environment with no special adaptations whatsoever for a radiation environment, and that was really confusing. And they think that the main reason for it is because they were forming these big biofilms called mats. They're like massive colonies of bacteria can form these biofilms that are like slippery, gooey, protective little environments for themselves. And apparently, maybe this was their speculation, may have been protecting against the radiation.
Cool. There's also some radiation tolerant bacterium, and one of them has an amazing name. It's called Methylobacterium radiotolerans. I love that the Latin name is basically like radiation tolerant. I guess life finds a way. That's a quote from Jurassic Park, I think.
Yes, it's from the infamous Goldblum. Life finds a way, and that's not the important part. That's one of the important parts of this story, is that life can thrive in really interesting places, and that has impacts or implications for where life started and can be in the solar system, but also for like your engineering approach of like how are you decommissioning a nuclear site. Because these bacteria are corrosive and they can quickly make the situation in Fukushima worse if you're not cleaning it up too fast.
Interesting. So whatever you use to encase the nuclear site, you got to make sure bacteria doesn't erode it.
Exactly, right? And that's really important. So it has implications for life and understanding where life came from, but also for like engineering and decommissioning.
Well, Jesse Rogerson is a professor of astrophysics at York University in Toronto, Canada. Jesse, thanks for joining us for Science News. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Always happy to be here. Thanks.
Coming up next, you get a messy, misspelled love note from your special someone for Valentine's Day. Would you rather that or a flawless but thoughtless one written by a robot? Well, you don't have to wonder because someone did the research. And they showed that AI romance, when your boo writes you a letter using ChatGPT, feels weird, makes you feel guilty for doing it, and is way less sexy than you think. Details on this one in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888 505 6644.
Sierra has all the best active and outdoor brands you need. From athletic stuff, like a full court pickup game, swish, to athletic-ish stuff, like a half-mile stroll. Get those steps in. And for morning hikes up the mountain trail, good pace. To nighttime ghost stories from the camping chair. What a twist. Whatever level of active, Sierra loves it all. Head to Sierra or Sierra.com for the brands you want at the prices that let you do it all. From athletic to athletic-ish, Sierra's got it.
Your above-average intelligence brought you here. It deserves above-average absurdity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Roses are red, violets are blue. If you use ChatGPT to write a Valentine's Day poem, the person you're writing it for will feel like it's a big F you. Okay, what we're going to discuss. Who doesn't love efficiency? But when it comes to romance, using a robot like ChatGPT to write a loved one a gushing email or a poem might save time, but it also comes at a cost. So we're going to dive into how this coming Valentine's Day, AI-written love notes will feel emotionally counterfeit, and why. We're here with Danielle Hass, a marketing researcher at West Virginia University. Danny, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a beautiful poem.
Thank you. I actually wrote that myself. I thought about asking ChatGPT to write one, but then I thought it'll make me seem like a fraud of an interviewer.
Well, you know what? You did a great job.
Did I, though?
I'm happy for you. You did.
I love that you looked into how AI is perceived romantically. I know I've heard of research where it's like if you hear your coworkers use AI, you think less of them. But I never thought to think, oh, what if I compose a gushing text to my girlfriend and use AI and she finds out? What motivated you to look into this?
Yeah, so it ended up coming from one of my co-authors who is just wonderful. Her name's Colleen. And it was her anniversary with her partner. And she used ChatGPT to help her write this poem.
Oh, no.
And she was like, oh, my God, I can't do this. She was so guilty. And she's like, I feel terrible. I have to. I have to tell him I have to come clean. Like, we can't do this. And so I think that it's something that is really relatable. There's this temptation because ChatGPT can write things really well and really fast, and you can come up with like these perfect sentences. But ultimately, at the end of the day, these messages are meant to be heartfelt and they're meant to come from our authentic selves. I think when we don't have our authentic selves in these messages, that's when we start to feel guilty too.
Okay, so your research comes up with this interesting concept, source credit discrepancy. I think I know what that means, but walk me through exactly what that means.
Yeah, so it's kind of this gap between, hey, like, did you actually write this versus did AI or even someone else use this? And so there's a source credit discrepancy in which, the AI wrote this, you're saying that you wrote it, but really that's not true. That's very dishonest. And especially as we are all using more and more tools with AI and kind of claiming it as our own, there's this gap that's really going to sort of make us question who we are and how we feel about ourselves.
Okay, let's talk about using large language models for romance. The people who do it or were asked to do it for your research, how did they end up feeling about it?
Guilty. So guilty.
In a word. So wait, you only really needed a sample size of one. You only really needed your co-author.
I know. But we did test like hundreds of people. So we did 5 experiments on this. And there was some iteration of, either you're writing the message yourself or you're asking ChatGPT, it's writing the message and you're copying and sending it over to your loved one. And across the board, the guilt, like the effect size was massive. It was so big across the board. There was not a single time where people writing them themselves felt guilty compared to those using AI.
What if they asked AI to do it? And I don't know if you actually checked this, but what if they asked AI to do it and then they went through it with a fine-tooth comb and kind of rewrote it in their own words? Was the guilt still there?
So we didn't test that. I think that's great future research. My inclination is that, like, yes, I think that it would be better. I tell my students, like, hey, you have to at least edit, because I want them to use AI, especially because this is marketing and, like, this is the world that we're going into. I'm like, you have to edit at least 50%. It can't be 50% of what's originally given in the output. And so, like, they feel better kind of at that point. But I would be so interested to see, like, what is the point when it's like, this is your own versus, well, like, it helped me versus, like, this is not mine at all.
What is it about signing your own name to AI written words that is different than, let's say, I don't know, buying a Hallmark card? Is it with the Hallmark card, it's kind of obvious that some writer at Hallmark did it?
Yeah.
Although it might have been AI at Hallmark, the side note.
hey, you never know.
Is it the taking credit for a machine's work that really causes this guilt?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially you're being dishonest. These words aren't your own. When you have a pre-printed greeting card, I mean, it's kind of a social norm. We all know that we are purchasing this card and you're just echoing the sentiments on the card. You're signing it. And you might write another personal note. And so that's just we know that this comes from Hallmark. On the other hand, when we're just writing a message on paper ourselves, there's no hey, ChatGPT wrote this that comes out of that. It's our handwriting, it's our signature. And so it's kind of you are taking credit for something that's not your own. And that's where this dishonesty, then leads to guilt.
What about, and maybe you didn't study this, but we can speculate, what about the perception? Okay, let's say my girlfriend writes me a heartfelt note. I'm really moved by it. And then later I found out, maybe I see it open on her computer, that it was ChatGPT. As someone who receives a love note, how might I feel?
I think betrayal. That's what comes to mind personally. But I will tell you, I think it depends. Because my sister actually, she did this wonderful thing for my birthday this past year.
She cheated?
No, she did, kind of. But no, I'll tell you the full story. So she wanted to surprise me and take me this really cool Airbnb in Washington State, and that's where she's from. And she wrote for the card, she wrote this poem telling me kind of hints of where we were going. So it was much more instructional. And she didn't feel guilty. I asked her after, I'm like, this is my research. She was like, yes, I do. I was like, did you feel guilty? And she was like, no, not at all. Because it was instructional. I think if she would have said, this is how I feel about you, this is my love for you, that's when I think the guilt would come in. And I was fine with her using ChatGPT because the limerick was really cool. And I don't know if she's not a poem or a poet, and I love her, but she's not a poet. And so writing it out was just so perfect. So it kind of she told me and I felt cool with it. But I think if you're hiding it and it's about how much someone loves you, that's when it gets to be really betrayal.
Kind of sketchy. Even if you emotionally know that it's kind of sketchy, is the motivation you're kind of hoping you'll get away with it when someone uses AI to write a love note or a poem?
I think so. I like to think of it in a positive way of maybe you just don't have the perfect words and maybe you're not the best with words, but you really want to convey what you truly feel and you just kind of feel like you can't. On the other hand, maybe you're exaggerating how you feel too. Or you want to seem maybe more educated or more emotional, or, you want to feel better about yourself and make it look like there's this perception that you are, just more in tune with your emotions and trying to impress the other person. But ultimately, whatever the reason is, I think it can hurt someone a lot.
I worry that this isn't going away. People are just getting better at using these tools. The tools are getting better. Do you think our expectations will shift? In 10 years, if we were talking, would you think that a love note that I wrote the prompt, can that be considered sincere?
I actually feel the opposite. So this topic has made me have existential crises of why are we all here and what is this all for? And I think that there's a lot of answers to that question. But I think that one reason that we're here is to be our authentic selves, to express our authentic selves with integrity. When I think about the difference between an AI and a human being, the advantage that we have as a human is that we have a heart, and I don't think AI will ever be able to replace that. But our hearts contain, there are compasses, there are souls. I tell my students all the time, when you're excited about something, that's your soul telling you to go on this path and to do this thing. And, they contain our intentions, our connections, our morality, all of these things. And it's if we're taking that away and we're outsourcing this part of ourselves to an unfeeling, heartless bot, can we still be our authentic selves with integrity? And I don't think so. And I think that AI is a wonderful tool. I tell my students to use it all the time, but I also think down the road, 10 years from now, there's going to be people who have crises of I've never made a decision for myself. I've never truly connected with someone myself because I'm constantly outsourcing to AI. So that's kind of what I see. I don't know. Maybe the norms will be that way, but I hope not.
Wow.
I'm glad people are guilty. I really am.
I don't know how we went from something so silly to something so deep. Thank you for that monologue. That was really inspired, Danny.
I think about it. a lot. It's who are you if all you are is doing your work? And I've told my students before, and it's kind of to guilt them into actually doing their work. But I'm if your manager can do the prompt that you just put into ChatGPT, what's your purpose at the firm?
Fair enough.
And so it scares them, and they're I have to come up with value beyond that. And it's yes, your knowledge, your skills, that's authentic, that's growth, that's what you're here for.
Anything especially corny that these large language models tucked into a love poem that you saw in your research?
It's the wedding vows that get me, and it's
Just
like
totally
you'll
generic.
be with me forever. When it's so gushy, like that's when I'm like, I don't even know if I feel that way about anyone. Maybe I'm heartless, but like I'm like, this is too much. But yeah, usually when it's too much, and when it's wedding vows, that's when I'm like, oh no.
Okay. If anything, people should be hearing from your research, don't write your wedding vows using a bot. I'm here with Danielle Hass, a marketing researcher at West Virginia University. Danny, this has been a great chat. I love your research area. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and good luck to everyone out there listening.
Coming up, thinking of quitting your job? Well, if your employer were only to give you more days off, it could stop you. But based on a new study, that number, more than you think. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show. Details in a minute.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast? Smart move. Being financially savvy? Smart move. Another smart move? Having State Farm help you create a competitive price when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the personal price plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Do you remember the Great Resignation, when millions of people didn't just leave their jobs for better pay, but they left because they were overworked or perhaps prioritizing a job more compatible with their lifestyle, their personal life? Well, a new study suggests something surprisingly basic might have kept people in their jobs, and it shows how to get employees not to quit. The finding? Give them enough paid time off. I'm here with someone who worked on that study. His name is Bill Kosteas. He's the Dean of the Graduate College and Economics Professor at Cleveland State University. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So you look at the data. What surprised you most about the fact that PTO, pay time off, actually affects whether people quit their job?
I'm not sure that anything was terribly surprising in it, honestly. It's you generally expect any kind of benefit that whether we're talking about paid time off, whether it's flexible scheduling, retirement plans, training, all of these things can have an impact on job satisfaction and ultimately worker turnover. So, and that's, I'm hoping later we could dig into some of the why the nuance of, in this paper we focused on retention, right, on turnover, but there's other margins of how workers can kind of respond to being dissatisfied at work. And that'll be future avenues of research that we didn't dig into in this series of papers that we did. But, and so not terribly surprising. Maybe the magnitude of the results that we get, but, there's some limitations in the study. So one thing I always say to folks, and something I always hammer home with my own students is, on a single study, be careful not to put too much weight on the exact results, and whatnot. We need future research to kind of dig a little deeper.
Okay, let's talk PTO and take a step back, because the show's on the air in Canada. I live in the U.S., and the U.S. is kind of like the weird kid at the party internationally when it comes to paid time off.
Yes.
How did the U.S. end up like the only rich country with no guaranteed paid time off in jobs? And then why does that make it so interesting to look at the effects it has? Because you get this wide difference between different careers.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the full history of how we got there. Other than, kind of in a broader brushstroke, we've tended to be a bit more laissez-faire, and we have a smaller welfare state typically, right? We have, if you compare us to most other OECD countries, but especially compared to Europe, right? Where Europe, it's kind of the amount of vacation time is more guaranteed. And we want to be a little careful too. Is we lump in PTO, right? Paid time off. We're lumping both vacation and sick leave in together, and it's partially an artifact of the data, the way the data was collected. So we wanted to use the full time frame available to us. We had to look at them together. But part of it is just, I think it's a cultural difference in the way we approach mandating benefits versus allowing businesses to choose. Right. And so I think I'll just kind of leave it at that kind of broader,
Sure.
broader context, and it's kind of where we're at. But yeah, for listeners in other countries, whether it's Canada, whether it's in Europe, this might sound like an odd conversation.
It certainly was when I first moved here. Okay, let's look into the data. 5 days of paid time off basically does nothing. People are as likely to quit as ever. At what point do more PTO days start to get people less likely to resign?
And so one thing it's important to note here is we took, right, the data was continuous in the sense of people reported I have 1, I have 2, I have 3, I have 6, I have 7. So we kind of chunked it up into 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and then more than 10 days. And so we know it may not be exactly that, cut off at 5 days, but I think what the point is that too few days may not be enough for folks. If you only give somebody 1 or 2 days off, what is that really? And then I don't know there's too many places that do that. Usually they kind of come in those chunks, right? Is you might have a week of PTO or 10, certainly vacation days tend to come in that, right? We don't, not too many places you have 3 vacation days. It's typically you have a week or 2, and then they'll kind of layer on top of that a few sick leave days as well. Some places though, some employers just do flat out, there's 15 days of PTO and you take them however you want. So I think that's the general sense we have is that, too few days is just you can't use them as much, right? Anything less than a week, you're really not getting much more than potential vacation time, right? Or if you do get sick or your kid gets sick and you have to stay home and take care of them for a few days, now you have 0 vacation time left. So I think that's a reasonable, and again, but that's kind of our sense of it. We didn't test that in any way, shape, or form. Once you start getting up to 6 to 10 days or more than that, now you're talking about, I can take a few days of sick leave if I need them, and I still have vacation days. So that's the way I think about it.
So how do employees respond to various amounts of vacation days? Is the finding as simple as they're less likely to resign if they have more?
Yeah, and so one caveat here is that these are average, what we call kind of average treatment effects, right? So depending on which specification we're looking at, if we're looking at men or women or the whole sample together, you might see that take just one of our main results from this. If I look at like the full sample of it, you get about between 40% reduction in the kind of full sample, or roughly around in there, 35 to 45%, depending on whether we're talking about 6 to 10 days or 10 days and more. Right? That's a pretty big saying that, that the rate at which someone is going to resign or voluntarily leave their job, it gets cut not quite in half, but pretty significant. And so that's one way of looking at, that's how we kind of interpret those results from what we're talking about. This, everybody's going to run and read the paper now, right? They're going to rush it, download the paper, read it. When you look at the numbers in it, that's how you interpret that. So
let's move the conversation to employers, to companies. I think a lot of them argue that giving our employees days off is expensive. But based on your data, these extra days off might help them retain people. Quitting is expensive. There's a huge cost to employees quitting, assuming you need to replace them. You got recruiting, rehiring, all that stuff. Would you say to employers, hey, you might want to consider giving your employees more vacation days?
I would say that's, you can look at our research and say, hey, here's some information, right, that might help you. Again, with another caveat there, right? It's we didn't break this down by industry or type, like, what occupations workers are in. And so that cost benefit analysis can change dramatically. For one thing, as I said, like if we want to take, say, 40% as a rough ballpark, because we got a range of estimates, in the paper. Let's say you want to take 40%. There's a 40% reduction in turnover rates on average. But again, that's on average. That might be in one particular industry, it might have a much smaller effect. And another one, it might have a larger effect, right? So I always go back to this. More research will help us dig into that and give better advice to employers and to policymakers as well.
Now, when the Great Resignation happened during COVID, I myself quit and changed careers during that time. Now, I think a lot of people blame that on, millennial entitlement. What did you find was the real reason behind there? Or do you have any narratives that might challenge that story?
No, well, so in our data, we focused, it was mostly in the pre-pandemic era mostly. And so that would actually be one interesting thing for us to look at as we get more data post-pandemic, right? It's kind of hard, you have maybe up to 20 years of data before the pandemic. You don't want to lop on a couple of years of data at the end post-pandemic, because none of a good balance, in terms of the numbers to see longer term effects post-pandemic. Pandemic itself was odd. From a labor market standpoint, obviously it was odding for all aspects of life for many of us, right? But from a labor market standpoint, it was a very unusual period of time, and many folks were sitting at home, maybe doing their jobs or doing some version of their jobs, and others were out still working, and with heightened fears of getting sick, right? And so there's a lot of things that went into play there.
Well, I really do appreciate you coming on the show, Bill. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Bill Kosteas is the Dean of the Graduate College and Economics Professor at Cleveland State University. Things will take a serious turn in a few moments' time. A new psychology study explores how people react to non-consensual photos online. We'll discuss and try to understand harm in a digital age. Details in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Is it possible that certain personality traits could predict who's most likely to invade somebody's privacy for a sexual crime? Well, there's a new study that says yes. The findings pretty uncomfortable, and we're going to dive in here with Dr. Dean Fido, a forensic psychology professor at the University of Derby in the UK. Dean, welcome to the program.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the results here, the term upskirting, kind of uncomfortable. Can you walk me through what it is from like a psychological point of view? Maybe not legally, but as a behavior. Like what's happening when somebody does that?
Yeah, of course. So it's a very gendered term. Typically, females are the individuals who are wearing skirts. And in the UK especially, we're trying to get rid of that term. And I'll tell you a bit why that now. What the behavior is when individuals use cameras or recording equipment to take pictures or images of genitalia underneath somebody's clothing. So you might have also heard of the term down blousing, which is looking from the top of an individual. And it doesn't just have to be female victims, it can be male victims or any type of gendered victim.
So what made you and your co-authors interested in studying this form of like image-based sexual abuse as opposed to maybe some other digital kind of crimes?
Yeah, of course. So we run a team whereby we're interested in all different types of image-based sexual abuse. So you may have heard of the term revenge pornography, deepfake sexual abuse, which is more in the media, currently cyber flashing. I'm sure your listeners might be okay with some of those terms associated with that. And upskirting was one of the terms which wasn't receiving much psychological-based intervention or assessment. And so we wanted to be one of the first individuals, the first groups to actually explore that through a psychological lens.
So the headline from your research, your findings, is there's this strong link for people who perform this kind of abuse to psychopathy.
Yes.
Walk me through that. What are some of these psychopathic traits that make someone more willing to commit these acts?
Yeah, of course. I'm really glad you said the phrase psychopathic trait. So when we think of psychopathy, we instantly go to murderers, serial killers, your Ted Bundys. But when we refer to psychopathic traits, what we're looking at is how individuals can be callous, they might lack empathy, they might be really manipulative, they might be sadistic in nature, they might have quite high narcissistic personality traits. And it's the amalgamation of these traits which spur people to behave both physically and, as we've shown in online spaces, in sexually deviant manners.
Now, is there a difference based on how you're judged in terms of the harm, like the harm caused by this act, whether the victim is a man or a woman?
Yeah, so we developed a vignette, which is a scenario-based examination whereby we had individuals at a spa setting. So to get around that gendered term of wearing a skirt, we had the individuals in spa robes, and we asked our participants to imagine what these individuals would be like lying in a spa setting, and they had the ability almost to look up the dressing gowns and take images should they wish. This was all kind of a metaphorical perspective. And what we found is that individuals who were male victims, our participants felt that there was a lot less harm, a lot more blame, and certainly a lot less criminality associated with these individuals being victims.
What do you make of that? I would say both types of victim, male, female, are kind of being hurt in the same way. It's kind of surprising that there's this gap.
Of course, and that's exactly what lots of our researchers argued, and we see a similar pattern regardless of whether it's quote-unquote revenge pornography or deepfake sexual abuse. We see that males who are victimized have a lot less impact associated with them. This has implications for how victims can seek help across barriers, how they deal with police, how they deal with courtroom settings, and within those courtroom settings, how the general public can perceive them as victims should it go to trial.
You asked your participants a question that kind of gives me chills.
Yes.
It's basically, would you commit this act if you knew you would not get caught? Would you take a photo of someone? Would you look at someone, invade their privacy, commit this form of abuse if you knew you wouldn't get caught? What does that question reveal about a certain individual if they answer it in kind of a negative, if they say yes?
So that question came out of this difficulty in terms of getting people to admit whether they have or have not engaged in such behaviors in the past. And because this was only just made illegal at the time of data collection, we didn't have any actual forensic populations, any people within prison settings to do these examinations on. So this is what we deem to be called a proclivity question. Now, proclivity means somebody's propensity to engage in a particular behavior. And by saying if you had 0% chance to get caught, what we're effectively saying is if there are no bad things that would happen to you associated with this, would you or would you not engage in that behavior? Interestingly, in the future, what we want to do is change that question slightly from 0% chance to get caught to 25% to 50%. And what we envisage is that people with these higher psychopathic personality traits would be reporting yes, regardless of that chance.
I want to move the conversation a bit towards some of these other forms of like abuse, like deep fake revenge pornography.
Sure.
What are your findings, or perhaps just your background as a forensic psychology professor? What do they tell you about that sort of act? Like who's likely to go on Grok, ask the AI to generate an image of someone I know without their consent that is horrific? Like, what sort of personality traits? Because we hear about this happening so much these days.
So psychopathy is prevalent across all of these traits. We also have, in particular, when it comes to quote-unquote revenge pornography, this belief in a just world. And what that means is people that believe that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, they're more likely to engage in these behaviors, potentially because, well, if you were sharing those quite raunchy images on Instagram, of course that was going to happen to you. If you were sharing these naked images with a partner, of course that was going to happen to you. And we also see an elevated rise in individuals with high levels of sadism, people who are older, and of course, people who are male as well.
That's a weird mix, psychopathy and a belief that the world should be fair. That can sort of entitle anybody to commit any negative act to someone they see as like deserving of it, can it?
Of course, and especially when it comes to deepfake, and you mentioned Grok, these tools are freely available. Anybody can click and play, and it actually is very concerning about the wealth of victims that this opens us up to in the future.
And anyone listening right now hearing this for the first time, these tools are widely available. Please don't.
Please don't.
And I hope regulators catch up pretty quick and put the kibosh or stop platforms like Grok from being able to generate adult imagery, especially based on photographs of real people.
Most definitely. We've just passed a law today at the time of filming in the UK whereby it's illegal to request either an individual or a piece of computer equipment to develop these deepfakes. So that's going to be a huge development, and it's something that's very much needed worldwide.
Hopefully that comes to North America pretty soon. Back to your study. Is there any other takeaways that you want people to know about these forms of sexual abuse and who's committing them?
The key takeaway for me is to flip that on its head and to say that lots of rhetoric goes into putting the blame on the victims. So, for example, they shouldn't have shared these images in the first place. They shouldn't be posting provocative or raunchy images on their social media. We need to make sure we're paying attention to the perpetrators of these crimes and keep the conversation focused on those individuals.
Well, Dean, it's been an informative chat. I really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your research, and having this conversation with me.
Thank you, David. Lovely time.
Dr. Dean Fido is a forensic psychology professor at the University of Derby in the UK. In just a few moments, do you become your true, most authentic self by following the rules or by breaking them? The question is this: is being a moral, good, upstanding person the same as being who you truly are? Sometimes the two clash. What do we do in that case? Things are about to get deep in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This Friday, Crime 101 hits theaters.
What is it that you do?
I take high-value items and make them disappear.
So you're a thief.
One crime connects them all.
I'm getting close. I know it.
But only one will walk away.
I underestimated you.
Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Barry Keoghan, and Halle Berry.
We're good at this.
Yeah.
Crime 101, directed by Bart Layton. Rated R, under 17 on admitted without parent. Special sneak previews Monday, everywhere Friday.
Broadcasting from the neutral zone, where every perspective gets diplomatic immunity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Let's talk about a deceptively simple question. Is being good, like being a good person, the same as being your true self? Like, what if being your authentic self means doing something selfish? When morality and being authentic clash and pull us in different directions, what happens? We are here to discuss that with Professor of Psychology at Cornell University, Jordan Wylie. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, David. I'm excited to chat.
So let's dig in. A lot of people get told be true to yourself. Like, you got to be your most authentic self. But what if that means doing something fundamentally, self-involved, fundamentally selfish, something that may not be morally good?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and it's at the heart of what we were interested in. There does seem to be some tension between being like a moral person in the world all of the time. Morality is full of rules and obligations that we have, and being like maybe true to yourself and who you are. Some of that seems like it requires that you kind of like break the rules a little bit here and there. And we're certainly not condoning, rule breaking as like, the only way people can feel they're, true to who they are. But I do think that that tension suggests that like maybe there are some spaces that actually help support us feeling like our true self, some spaces where rule breaking and bending conventions are more natural. And so we've thought a lot about the role of art and the aesthetic domain in providing like a safe space for you to like kind of explore the edges of your personality, which might kind of clash with everyday moral obligations.
Like being on the radio every day. I'm just saying that for a friend. That has nothing to do with me. What are some examples of people who, when they blossom into their most authentic self, they end up behaving in ways that maybe aren't morally good?
Yeah. So I think that there are a ton of examples in the art world,
okay.
In particular. So the example that I really like to use is the example of Gauguin. So somebody who, if you're not familiar, Gauguin is a famous painter who had a family, so many moral obligations surrounding, family life and children and spouses, and he sort of pushed those things aside and then went to French Tahiti and developed his art into something that like previously it didn't quite reach. And in doing so, did a lot of morally bad things, including just abandoning one's family. So this is an example of like really pushing aside. And then it's, at least it's my intuition that like in exploring his art in that way, he was really exploring, like truly who he was deep down, and his art really benefited from it.
Now, when people hear authenticity, I think they sometimes think like that means good,
Mm-hmm.
What does your research suggest when you hear someone say they're being their true self around like morality?
Yeah, so it is the case that that most people, and a lot of research has found that being good is like one way to achieve the feeling of being one's true self, because a lot of people have the belief that humans are sort of like deep down all pretty morally good. And so that's one path to like feeling that feeling of authenticity, is being good and nice to other people. But one of the things we were interested in is, what are some other spaces? Again, because it's my intuition that like when we really think about the moral domain and all of the tensions and obligations that exist there, it doesn't like immediately seem obvious to me that that's like the perfect place for proliferation of your like true, authentic, good self. So the art space again is like just another avenue, not the only one, certainly. And in our empirical work, we find that people think being good is a really good way to find one's true self. Just art and some of these like rule-bendy conventions are another path that sometimes are equal, sometimes are less, and actually sometimes beat out what it feels like to be like good.
Let's talk a little bit about your experiment. You asked participants to create a pie chart or divide a pie chart to represent how much time they want to allocate to areas in their lives.
Uh-huh.
Walk me through that a little bit and tell me what we can conclude based on it.
Yeah. So again, we're thinking a lot about the kinds of things that make life meaningful and whether morality is like chief among them. And there's reasons to think that it should be and that it is. There's work in philosophy, for example, it suggests that morality is, and empirical work in psychology that morality is, and work in philosophy that suggests even that it should be the thing that people care about the most. And so we just wanted to see what everyday people think. And we looked at some accounts of the kinds of things that people value in their lives from other folks, Martha Nussbaum in particular, and Sen. And we pulled those and like sort of, put them together in ways that everyday people can like easily, like colloquially understand. And we came up with a couple of categories. So relationships, how you connect with other people, other animals, the environment. So your relationships to other things, morality, aesthetics and intellectual pursuits, civics, and play. And then we just ask people to, sort the world in ways that feels like that's the best. If I lived a perfect life, an ideal life, this would be exactly the life that this is how I would allocate my time. And what we find is that people really prioritize relationships. So when they have to think about time as zero sum, you can only devote so much time. Where would you like that time to go? People prioritize about 33% of that time to relationships. And then morality and aesthetics are tied in second place, close to 20%. And then in the third place or fourth place, I guess, is play and leisure. And then in last place by like a large margin are our civic sort of responsibilities.
Oh, boy.
We think it's pretty funny. But
if we get back to the crux of it, that it's possible, we take your artist example of sort of walking out on their family to go pursue being an artist. If we take the fact that you can feel deeply authentic while doing morally questionable things, do you think people realize that and they're aware of this tension in their own lives?
Yeah, I mean, such an interesting question. I think probably it's the case that people in the art space do. I have some other work which looks at self-reported artists' feelings of true self and also third party, so people who don't have artist jobs, what they think artists' lives are like. And we get kind of similar results that people think that, so third parties, people think that people who have artist jobs like a painter or a poet, that they get to like sort of bend the rules at work and they get to break norms and that those things afford being like a sort of autonomous agent and being who you really are. And we get first person accounts. So people who have those jobs say, yeah, at work, I do feel like I get to be like sort of creative and push boundaries. And we contrast that to people who have moral jobs who, maybe thankfully, say that they don't feel like they can really push boundaries in that way. And those are jobs like, being a doctor or, a firefighter or something like that. So we do see pretty consistent results when we look across these like different methods. It seems like people have in mind the same kind of thing, which is like the free artist. And to some extent, it seems to match reality.
Well, I completely get it. My first year doing radio professionally, I had to work overnights and I didn't ask my girlfriend permission to do this job. And so I just didn't see her for a year. And it wasn't maybe the best moral thing that I could have done, but I was pursuing creative work. Regardless, though, I appreciate you coming on the show, Jordan. Thanks for sharing your research and having this discussion with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really had a fun time chatting.
Jordan Wylie is a professor of psychology at Cornell University. Up next, the comedian who found herself in a 30-year-old marriage with 3 kids and a mother-in-law who committed crimes and was forced to live with her. Want details of the story? Stick around for it.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Imagine being in a 30-year marriage with 3 kids, all while living under the same roof as your mother-in-law and not asking for any of it. Well, that is what happened to Kate Davis, a comedian and keynote speaker whose comedy special is released on February 16th called In-Laws and Outlaws. Kate, I'm so excited to dive in. I could not imagine living with my mother-in-law.
Oh my gosh, David, nor could I. If you would have told me I signed up for any of this, I'd be like, absolutely not. And you know what? It's so funny because life just happens, and it took me a long time to turn it into a joke because it was so traumatic. She literally showed up in November telling us she was arrested, went to trial without a lawyer, didn't want to bug anyone, was convicted of tax evasion and might be going to jail.
Great.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, Christmas came early.
That's one way to get rid of your mother-in-law, send her to jail.
No.
My grandmother was always like, I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to bother anyone. When she clearly needed help, and we would have helped her. I couldn't imagine that applying to getting counsel in a criminal proceeding.
No, but see, the thing is, they took everything. They took her house. They took her car, like literally everything, but then they gave her house arrest. Why am I being punished? That's all I want to know, right? And she calls me 2-3 times a day, which is weird because she lives in our basement. I'm like, stop it. Just come up. Anyway, it's a lot.
Sounds like it. My goodness. Yeah. I couldn't. What is it like living with your mother-in-law with 3 kids and being in a marriage for that long?
Well, yeah. And the kids are old and they're just, not old, but in their 20s, and they won't leave. They just come back with more people. And I know they're never going to be able to buy a house or afford a house until I'm dead. But then they're going to realize I reverse mortgaged. They're never going to own a house.
Oh, my goodness. You're a mess. I love it. Okay, well, tell me about your upcoming comedy special, In-Laws and Outlaws.
Yeah, so I recorded this special, and I just wanted my body of work out there. And I felt like time was going by and these jokes, I just want to be relevant in my own life with my stand-up. I want to talk about being an empty nester because I am, and they did come back, right? And I don't want my comedy act to stay where, I'm still, a mom with young children. I'm not. So to me, it's just important to put it out there, to go, it's okay to be older. Aging is friggin' weird.
I know.
And being in a marriage of I've been with my husband since I was 21. We've been we've lived 7 different lifetimes together and we're such different people now. So I just want it all, like we used to run to bed, to fool around. Now we run to bed to try and fall asleep before the other starts snoring. Life changes.
Earplugs, okay? Earplugs. As a divorcee, I totally get it. So your mother-in-law story, it's pretty dramatic, but I think there's a universal suffering we all have with in-laws that's relatable. Why does everyone suffer so much with in-laws? Why are they always so bad?
Well, you know what? I just think we have to give and take. And I believe that, with my mother-in-law, she never... she's of a different generation. We think differently. Like I think differently from my kids. My kids have amazing boundaries. I didn't grow up with boundaries. What are boundaries? Like my daughter moved back home and literally says to me, "Don't talk to me on Wednesdays." And I'm like, what's going on Wednesdays?
What? Yeah, what is going on Wednesdays?
She's on a voice fast every Wednesday.
A voice fast?
Fast, yeah. So you can't talk on a Wednesday.
Where is she getting this?
Exactly. She was voted most likely in our family to join a cult. I'm not going to lie. But
honestly, it sounds like she's already is in one. Although I like the idea of a voice fast. It's an excuse not to talk to people. It's not the worst idea.
It's not the worst idea.
My theory is in your 20s, when you're just starting to become an adult, you barely realize how to cope with your own family. And then you start dating someone, you marry someone. All of a sudden, you get this whole other family you got to navigate.
Yes.
I think that's why in-laws are so annoying.
Yes, absolutely. And then the backstory of what your partner went through with these people. My mother was this, my dad was this. And then you meet them and you're like, hi, I know what's really going on. So she's just very passive aggressive and it's pretty fun. She just watches Judge Judy all day.
Oh,
yeah. I think she's getting ready for her next court trial.
Oh,
anyway.
She knows that's not a real court, right? Your Honor, I saw it on Judge Judy, therefore I'm innocent. That's the Judge Judy defense. Maybe get your mother-in-law a lawyer. Is that so crazy?
It was too late by the time she had already been tried. Like she must have driven them crazy in trial because it's such a different language. Law is such a different language, and here she is, this little woman in her 70s, just and there's no cash anywhere. Like she just literally didn't file her taxes.
She's just like, this is optional.
This is optional. Well,
I'm sure it worked for many years until it didn't.
Yeah, until it didn't.
Are they going to throw her in prison, in jail?
No, they gave her house arrest,
okay.
Like I said.
Okay, so they're going to throw you in prison.
Exactly. Yeah, she showed up with an anklet.
All right.
Anyway.
So wait, they take away your house as part of like the settlement, whatever, as part of, coming down on you for not paying your taxes?
Yeah.
But then they put you on house arrest.
That's right. Exactly. That's my point.
Doesn't that seem a little odd?
Yeah, it does. I think you should, if you're listening to this, write write complaint letters. Can't give people house arrest after taking their house. But then, okay, we were talking about this earlier, like the whole Beckham family feud.
Sure.
Right? So, if we're talking about in-laws.
Is that basically your family except totally different?
Well, we're the poor version. And way not good looking. We're not we're the ugly version of the.
Well, I can relate to that. Wait, you were dancing at your son's wedding up on your son? Okay.
That is crazy. Did they show any video? I haven't seen the video.
I just think it was reports. of Victoria Beckham dancing on her son.
Getting down.
Wild, huh?
Wow. That is, no, there was none of that at my wedding. But I got to say, the dad of Nicola came out today or yesterday and basically said, and he was so calm, right? And he's like, my only advice is stop talking to the press, all of you. And
that is good advice.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, absolutely.
And yet here you are talking to me. Okay, so back to the comedy special. I used to dabble in stand-up. I did it for 5 years. I wasn't great at it. Maybe I had 5 minutes after 5 years. What is it like to record a full special? That's got to be tricky.
Well, this is actually my second one I've done. And it was actually just a joy. Like, I was just so happy to put it out there. It was fun rehearsing it. It was fun. I think the most nerve-wracking thing about putting on a special, especially, I filmed it in Toronto, was just getting people there. Like, I was like, am I going to film a special and it's just going to be looking out? Because I actually went to film it in COVID and then we got shut down again. And I thought, well, if we get shut down, maybe I'll just do like pictures of Ben Affleck's face in all the seats.
Perfect. He's a big fan, I hear.
Yeah, he's such a big fan of mine. And I was like, Ben, stop it. But then, and then we got shut down again. And then the wind was sort of just taken out of my sail. So now it's here. And I'm glad I waited only because I have way more, better bits. And yeah, it was just a labor of love. And I just really wanted my voice out there. And, all the young kids are so, putting all their stuff out there. I have enough problems figuring out where to look in my camera. So,
well, if you like what you hear, I'm here with Kate Davis, a comedian, a keynote speaker. Her comedy special gets released on the 16th of this month. It's called In-Laws and Outlaws. Kate, where could I find the special if I wanted to watch it?
Oh, it's at katedavis.ca. It's all over YouTube. And you can follow me on Instagram and all those just at Kate Davis Comic.
Kate, thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, David.
In just a few moments' time, over 1 in 4 people now eat their meals alone. Is that peaceful independence? Is it a good thing? Or is it a warning sign about how disconnected we've become? Are we lonely? Well, we'll have that discussion and answer all those questions in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The last show with David Cooper.
Almost 20% of people in the U.S. ate their most recent meal alone, up 10% from 20 years ago. So if more people are doing it, is solo dining freedom or is it loneliness? Is eating a meal by your lonesome a social alarm bell that we're all ignoring? Well, that is what we're going to discuss here with Jess Janz, a writer and facilitator of the event, Dinner with Strangers. Jess, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, gut check question. When you hear this stat that almost 1 in 4 people, at least in the U.S., ate their last meal alone, what is your gut reaction to it? Or do you think, hey, that makes total sense?
Well, I kind of go both ways. I mean, my gut initial reaction is like, oh my gosh, that sounds so sad. And then I kind of talk it back being like, okay, well, I eat alone a lot, or if I'm traveling, or maybe they just caught a bunch of people on their way back from somewhere. Like it's just a Tuesday night out and you're out of groceries. Like they're in and of itself, eating alone is not problematic. But the fact that it's spiking so significantly is probably telling us something. And I think part of that has to do with, and when we think about so much conversation around loneliness too, that I think we're not ritualizing regular things like just going out for dinner when it's not this big Instagrammable thing. We're not getting together with people on a regular basis as much as we used to. So yeah, that's my initial, it's upsetting. I don't know.
I think that's right. Kind of splitting it into two. On the one hand, going to a restaurant alone, it kind of takes courage because you're out in public. People might look at you and think you're alone. My ex-wife and I were once at a restaurant and the host called Norbert for one. It's a sad name to be alone with.
Oh, no.
But Norbert, it takes a lot of courage to travel alone, to eat alone like that. I think that's part of being an adult, an individual. That's one thing. And then there's people who just are alone all the time. They're eating meals at home alone. They're eating meals out alone. They aren't socializing enough. And that's kind of what I want to dig into here. And I think that's the problem, this loneliness versus, intentional solitude, if you will.
Yeah, because I think about this a lot of we don't have spaces where it's okay to go alone, that are social spaces where you do show up alone and then end up meeting people. I feel in England or in the UK, they have pub culture. It's okay to just go, oh, I'm going to run down to the pub and see what happens. And you kind of intermix and intermingle. And in North America, we don't have that culture. It is that Norbert for one, how sad, but we would never go oh, does Norbert want to come shoot this crap? I can't say that. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, well done. Well done. We're on the radio. You did that right.
I know. I was woo, we're not just hanging out. like, are we inviting Norbert? Like, maybe that's like the next layer to this of like, how are we interacting with the Norbert for ones around us when we're out for dinner? And of course, that it's like, you might be celebrating an anniversary. Maybe that's the only night a week that you and your partner have to like catch up and connect, and like, that's okay. But are we in general, in the way that we move through our communities and in our neighborhoods, like interacting and like inviting more people to speak with us, whether it's sitting down for dinner is a significant, commitment of time. But I think that we kind of practice individualism in the way that we move through our day to day. And that's like another element to this of like, we look at Norbert and we're like, you're so sad. But we're like, okay, am I interacting with Norbert at any point throughout my movement throughout the neighborhood?
Tell me more about these dinner with strangers events that you've hosted and how they might address this problem of people being alone too much and eating alone too much.
Yeah. Well, I've been running this dinner since 2017. It started in my friend's hair studio. And I would invite 4 friends who didn't know each other, and he would invite 4 friends who didn't know each other. And the only rule is that no one can say what they do for work. And
I like that.
Which is so fascinating. Either people love it because they like don't particularly like, they're like, my job is fine, whatever, neutral to not liking their job. And then other people like twitch out if they have their entire identity in their job. So both ways, it's like a good character building experience. And it's interesting because everyone comes alone to dinner with strangers. So everyone is like, has a mutual and collective discomfort because we don't go places alone. And so dinner with strangers, they are eating alone, but eating alone together. And it's been this really fascinating thing to see. Basically, it's been a 9-year anthropological unofficial study on my part, I guess, of like how quickly can we share something about ourselves and break down those barriers and like get past small talk and share something real about where we come from or what we're thinking about or learning about, what we care about, or where we're going.
When that barrier goes down, a bunch of strangers who maybe have like lost the social skill of shared eating, when they come together, are friendships made? Like if one takes the plunge and goes to a thing, maybe it's a dinner party at a friend's house where the friend assembles a bunch of strangers. Doesn't have to be a formal event like the one you throw, could be. What ends up happening to the people who come?
Yeah, I think that there's like, something that I think is really magical is that like, or unique is that it's not about necessarily like, oh, come here and meet your new best friend. Like you also could sit next to a circus clown for the night and be like, wow, that's fascinating. Like I would have otherwise never met that person. And now I got this like 3-hour insight into what it's like to be them.
But wait, you're not allowed to talk about what you do for a living.
Well, and then I guess you would never know. You could sit next to a circus clown and never know it. Imagine.
Yes. One of my close friends is a clown, and she would not be able to function. I feel like she wears her occupation on her sleeve,
I would love to meet what like an obvious clown is like, but no, I think it's like something happens because there's like an opt-in, obviously at dinner with strangers specifically, but I hope that when people walk away from that, they think about, in what ways am I being more curious with people around me? Like if I am going to a house party or I am in mixed company of like a friend of a friend's house or like a group of 12, but I only know half the people there, am I only talking to the people that I know, or am I broadening my horizons and engaging other people around me? And I think, I don't know, I'm one of those existential people who's on a bus being like, all of these people have birthdays and they have people who know their birthdays, and we're just like not crossing that barrier at all times. Like everyone has a universe in themselves that we might learn from or be surprised by. And when we're not engaging with each other on a regular basis, then we're missing out on all of those worlds that are around us, And I think every time we walk out of the house, we can be surprised by who we meet.
I love it. And it's a real argument for why one might go to something like maybe a party with a bunch of strangers and talk to those strangers. Let's talk about the other thread here that I mentioned several minutes ago, and you did as well, eating alone as something you can gain something from, like kind of being, I don't know, intentionally having solitude and going out in public and exploring new places without having to have a buddy there with you. Is there an argument for eating alone? Like maybe I take a trip to Europe and at a big city and I don't know anyone and I go sit at a bar at a restaurant.
Absolutely. I mean, I travel when I'm traveling for work or I travel alone a lot. And like, I'm a closeted introvert. I would say people are really surprised to find out I'm an introvert because of my work. But I love bringing a book to a restaurant and like observe, like the people watching is unmatched. If you sit at a bar with a book and like have a 2-course meal and a couple glasses of wine, like you will observe a lot of characters. They may or may not engage. Like anything can happen when you eat alone. I'm like a big supporter of that. And I think it's important, whether it's eating alone or otherwise, like to put ourselves out of our comfort zone every once in a while and not have the safety blanket of other people and see what happens.
Well, you can find out more about Jess Janz's upcoming book and pre-order it. It's called The Table Where We Meet. More info at jessjanz.com. Jess is a writer and facilitator of the event Dinner with Strangers. Jess, this conversation has been a joy. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much, David. So nice to chat with you.
That's a wrap on the show, the night, the week. Want to catch videos of what we do here on the program? Want to see a weird reaction shot of a guest's face when I ask them a particularly odd question? Follow us on social media, where we'll post video clips of the program. We're on most platforms at lastshow.pizza, like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You get what I'm trying to say. Also, we've got a podcast. So if you like what you've heard, but you just tuned in so you missed some of the program and you want to hear what you missed, or you loved a particular interview that you want to hear again, fear not, you can subscribe to our podcast. Find out more details at our website. That's at www.lastshow.pizza. That's not .com, .pizza, or just search David Cooper Last Show on your favorite podcast app, like Apple or Spotify. We'll pop up and you can subscribe. Also, there's some bonus content that you won't hear on the regular radio program. And I mean it. We got some stuff dropping this weekend on the podcast. So do subscribe. I'm David Cooper. This was The Last Show. We'll be back Monday night.
The world is changing. From the misuse of AI and the rise of deepfakes to the dangerous spread of misinformation, it's getting harder for Canadians to separate fact from fiction. That's why having a trustworthy news source is vital. At Global News, we're committed to objective journalism that cuts through the noise. Stick to the facts. Global News, Canada's trusted news.